My name is Michael Meth, and I am the Dean of the San Jose State University King Library. I also have the pleasure of being the interim dean of the newly named College of Information, Data, and Society, which some of you might remember as the College of Professional and Global Education here at San Jose State University. The new college is home to SJSU's iSchool, and I want to note that our iSchool is the largest iSchool in the US. And now I want to get us going on the second Evolving Library event. But before we do, I'd like to begin this program with a land acknowledgement. We recognize that while we are gathered at San Jose State University, we are on the ethno-historical tribal territory of the Thami and Ohlone, who were the direct ancestors of the lineages enrolled in the Muwekma Ohlone tribe, and who are missionized into missions Santa Clara, San Jose, and Dolores. The lands on which San Jose State University is established was and continues to be of significance to the Muwekma Ohlone tribe. We also recognize that the ancestors of the Muwekma Ohlone constructed and maintained the 3 Bay Area missions. Our campus extends to surrounding areas that held a Tupantak, a traditional roundhouse, which were once located at the historic Lope Inigo, land grant Rancho Posolmi, Ipositas de las Animas, the Little Wells of Souls, and also Marcelo, Pio, and Cristobal's land grant Rancho Olistac, which were places of celebration and religious ceremonies, as well as nearby ancestral heritage shell mounds that served as the tribe's traditional cemetery sites and territorial monuments. San Jose State University also desires to honor the military service of the Muwekma men and women who have honorably served overseas during World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm, Iraq, and who are still serving in the United States Armed Forces today. Thank you. Before I get started with my opening remarks, also a brief moment of housekeeping. Today's event will be recorded, so hello to everyone who is online or who will be watching this in the future, which is very appropriate as we're talking about the future of libraries. The recording will also be available and shared with all of our attendees, and we encourage you to share it with your colleagues to continue the conversation after we conclude today. For all of our online attendees, please drop your questions in the Q&A boxes. And for those of you in the room, please raise your hand after the panel is concluded, and we will come over with a microphone so that you will be able to speak into it and everybody in attendance, online or in person, can hear you. All right, I think that's housekeeping. With that being said, I want to just give a little bit of background about why we host this Evolving Library series. So libraries have long been the cornerstones of knowledge and community. In this rapidly evolving time that we live in, our role continues to evolve and expand. We continue to adapt to future needs, and libraries are dynamic hubs of learning, of technology, and innovation. And we do all of this in the context of the communities that we serve. By integrating digital resources, offering access to cutting-edge technology, and fostering inclusive environments, libraries are not just keeping pace with the future, but we are helping to also shape and guide it. With our colleagues at the iSchool, the SJSU King Library is in a unique position to be thought leaders in this vital and impactful industry. And I would like to introduce you now to our moderator host, Sandra Hirsh. Sandra Hirsh is Associate Dean for Academics in the College of Information, Data, and Society, just announced, as I mentioned, at San Jose State University. She previously served as Professor and Director of the SJSU School of Information. She also worked at HP Labs, Microsoft, and LinkedIn. And Sandy has been shaping libraries and our future as an educator, but also as past president of the Association for Library and Information Science Education and the Association for Information Science and Technology ASIST, along with many, many other board and leadership appointments she has held. Her book about the future of libraries, Library 2035, Imagining the Next Generation of Libraries, was published by Rowman and Littlefield in March of 2024, and it kind of gave us the impetus and the title for this series that we're convening today. When Sandy first told me about her book project, I was reminded of a slogan that I thought was very appropriate. And I saw this slogan at the Smithsonian Institute a couple of years ago when I visited, and it was even printed on a shirt, and I bought the shirt and said, "Future Curious." And I think all of us are very curious about the future holds. And today we have a very esteemed panel that Sandy will introduce in a second. So with that being said, let's explore some of the futures of libraries as we see it here. And Sandy, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mike. And thank you for that great introduction and also the invitation to moderate this panel today. So as Mike said, my new book, Library 2035, Imagining the Next Generation of Libraries, which you can see here, it builds on, actually, as he said, was published in March of this year. And it builds on another book that was published before that was called Library 2020. Today's leading visionaries describe tomorrow's library, and it was written and edited by Joe Janes. So this book builds upon that and takes the next decade ahead to look ahead to see what the future holds. And we felt it was really time for making this kind of new assessment about what the future of libraries looks like, given all the ways that the world has changed since the book Library 2020 was initially published in 2013. For example, overnight, as you all remember, the pandemic changed how society is and also changed how libraries serve their communities and forever change the way that we deliver our services and provide access to technologies. Plus now, as we're seeing the expansion of generative AI and the integration of that, it was definitely time to revisit the topic and think about what the future holds, and also to reflect upon what we've learned in the past decade and to update our thinking about what the future of libraries will look like by the year of 2035. So to do this, I invited library thought leaders from across the United States who represented a broad range of perspectives and had a broad range of experiences to answer the following question. Basically, I asked each person to address this. The library in 2035 will be, must not be, will not be, can't be, and then I left it up to them to fill in the blank. So as you can imagine, that's not an easy task to think about and imagine and speculate what the future will hold. They all had to look into their crystal balls to do that. But I was very grateful that 29 library leaders who agreed to contribute their perspectives about the future of libraries to this book. I did want to mention that to expand upon the content that you see in the book, I also conducted 23 webcast interviews with the contributors to the book to explore some of the chapter's key themes and to expand upon some of their thinking and answer additional questions about the book. And you can find those for free on YouTube. And also there's a webcast link that we could share with you. So with that, I'm very excited to moderate today's panel discussion about the future of libraries. With us today, we have two people who contributed chapters to the book, plus we have a thought leader from San Jose State University Library who will also share her perspective. So I'm going to introduce them all now. So to my immediate left, we have Patty Wong, and she serves as the city librarian at Santa Clara City Library and is a part-time faculty member for the San Jose State University iSchool, where she teaches grant writing. She also served as ALA president in 2021-22, and she's been in service to the community for more than 40 years. And the title of her book chapter in Library 2035 is The Library as Community Enthusiast, Champion, and Advocate. Next, we have Erin Berman, who's in the middle. And Erin Berman is a fierce privacy advocate and author, known for her former role leading the American Library Association's Privacy Subcommittee and her publications, Your Technology Outreach Adventure, Tools for Human-Centered Problem Solving, and The Ultimate Privacy Field Guide. Currently, she serves as the Equitable Libraries Division Director at the Alameda County Library and is the co-editor of the next edition of ALA's Intellectual Freedom Manual. The title of her book chapter in Library 2035 is Teetering on the Edge of Trust Cliff. And next we have Christina Muñe, who is the Associate Dean of Innovation and Resource Management at San Jose State University Library. She is the author of Libraries Supporting Online Learning, Practical Strategies and Best Practices, and she is currently leading the development of an NEH-funded Digital Humanities Center at San Jose State University. And you may have walked by it when you came into the library, which she's doing in partnership with the city of San Jose's public library. So in this session today, so I'm very excited they all agreed to come in on this very hot day, to come join me to talk on this panel. But in this session, I've prepared a few questions in advance that I'm going to pose to each of the panelists. And then we're going to have time, as Mike mentioned, for your questions as well. And I have some questions in the wings too, in case you can't think of anything straight off the bat, but I'm hoping that you will have some great questions to ask our panelists. So I'm going to start off with the first question, which is basically, can you tell us by what your vision is of a library in the year 2035? So I'm going to start with you, Patty.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Great, okay. You know, 2035 is really not that far away, right? As someone who's been in the profession for about 40 years now, we've gone through a lot of change, and we will continue to go through a lot of change. My vision, though, for the libraries of 2035, and I hope that a lot of the libraries today employ some of the same practices, is that it really is community focused. Community in its broadest sense of what that means. And to me, that means embracive of all of the needs of that community, to be mindful of the changing needs, to be aware of the demographics, but also all the people who we actually don't serve. We spend a lot of time talking about service to community, and a lot of times we focus on our users, and we don't really spend a whole lot of time thinking about our non-users or our potential users, if you will. So it's what I'm delighted about in front of me with all of you, and I think all of our audience out there, is how diverse our library staff have become. And I hope that continues to happen, because our community is increasingly becoming more and more diverse. In Santa Clara City, we have 44% Asian community members, 44%. That's all very large. That's part of the reason why actually I decided to move to Santa Clara and serve that community, because I had never been in a community where a majority of the people who walking through the door look like me. And so I thought I might actually be able to bring a little bit more, I would say, joy and esprit de corps and acknowledgement to the needs of the diverse needs. But of course, I alone, of course, don't represent all of that. So you would want, I hope, in 2035, a staff that is knowledgeable, that is well-trained, that is eager and persistent, and to facilitate good communication with the community, to be knowledgeable of what that looks like, to be community enthusiasts, to meet community where they are, and to be able to provide services in a way that is both integrating the needs of the community, but also with community, so that it's community-based and community-focused.
Thank you, Patty. And if I had to pick one theme that emerged the most strongly throughout the book, I would say it is the importance of community, which libraries are about today, but there's such an intensity to that focus, and the importance of representing all types of the community, from the entire diversity, as Patty was just talking about. And I think that was just a sense of urgency and importance to the book. So I'm really glad that you surfaced that. Go ahead, Erin.
I think I'm going to actually build a lot on what you were talking about, Patty, and kind of lead into this concept of slowing down. I think for a lot of, leading up until 2020, right, it is how many people can we get through the door? How many people can we serve? How many, let's just get more and more and more and more. We need more books out. We need more of this. And the pandemic forced us to stop. A real hard stop. And I think especially in our library, we really took that to heart and have tried to tell people, let's slow down. And we have kind of a motto in our library, which is used a lot in race equity work, which is go slow, go together, go fast, go alone. And I can see a library in the future. I want us to think about, how do we slow down, and how do we think about the depth of our interactions with people? That rather than being transactional as libraries, that we can really focus on really meaningful interactions with individuals that need us the most. And I think that goes into what Patty was saying with like our staff representing what our community looks like. And so part of that has to be an evaluation of, you know, the master's degree requirement for positions, especially within public libraries as well. And how do we bring people who may not have traditional backgrounds or traditional opportunities into the library who are interested and excited about working with the communities where they live and grew up and care deeply about. And so for me, that's kind of like when I look at a library in 2035, and I you know, wrote specifically about privacy within that, but I think, you know, it gets into the equity issues of who in our community needs our services the most. Yes, we're open to everybody and everybody can come into the library, but how do we tailor our services to be that community focused? How do we focus our energies on the folks who really, we are the sole source for public libraries? And I think it goes for academic too, and especially in school libraries. But just, yeah, that's kind of how I was thinking about things.
Great, thank you, Christina.
Yeah, although when I was thinking about this question, I immediately started thinking about technology. Ultimately, it led me to the same place. So what I was thinking about is, you know, with this kind of rapid adoption of generative AI by users and by library vendors incorporating into tools and by things like chatbots, I think increasingly the person-to-person transactions that we have in the library are going to become person-to-AI transactions. And what I mean is like account and service questions, and increasingly like connecting people to resources, content synthesis and summarization. A lot of that is going to be done through AI and already actually is in some ways. And the same thing, metadata creation, cataloging, collection management, right? But what that automation can do is actually free up library professional time to focus on things like community needs and adding value to the collections and resources and services, additional value, right? On top of what we already do. The things that we already offer. And we can do that by working with like community members and researchers and students and faculty by creating historical and cultural context around our collections and around our archives and building experiential learning opportunities with them, like whether that's VR and AR, interactive timelines and maps, digital storytelling. We can really build on what we offer and what we have to make it more meaningful to the community and build those relationships and partnerships that we need to serve underserved and marginalized folks that we aren't reaching now. So to be able to go out into the community, do needs assessment with folks that aren't using us and build a more shared, collaborative, representative vision of what the library is as an academic and civic center, right? So I would hope that that's what happens. And when you also think about, when I see the way that people are asking to use the library more and more, it also is community focused versus like a place for stuff, which is that people want meeting space and exhibit space and performance space. They want to have celebrations and events. And that's what the library is going to increasingly become. So I think I was in a meeting a few weeks ago, actually with Sandy, and someone had mentioned, a head of a research library said in 10 years, there won't be library buildings. And I think actually totally not the case, but they're going to be for people. They're going to be buildings where we live and build our lives rather than just check things out of, right? So I do imagine in 2035, both things, services and spaces look different, but again, really community oriented.
I really like how you all kind of dovetailed off of each other, but it's also a lot of the themes that did emerge also in the book, and some of the digital equity themes were really strong, how we're bridging the digital divide, and making sure that all the different parts of our communities are served and are able to get access to the things that they need in order to be successful and to thrive in their communities. So I'm really, that was great. Thank you. Let me ask you now, I'm going to start with you this time, Christina. So what are some of the ways that libraries and library professionals should prepare for the future that you've just envisioned to take advantage of some of the opportunities and prepare for the challenges?
Yeah, so I have this question all the time. I mean, I think about this, I ask this question all the time. So I think actually the best way that libraries and library professionals can prepare for the future is just by being flexible, right? So being able to adapt, to be agile, to lead change, to manage transition. We are the one constant in libraries is change. And so I think being able to perform an excellent needs assessment, being able to strategically plan new projects and new services, make partnerships and relationships with people who we typically work with and people we don't, like new radical partnerships, being able to find new ways to draw people into the library and into your projects, assessing them and then reiterating. That cycle is something everyone needs to be able to do. I think to be really successful in a library and especially like library leadership right now. But that kind of constant change also leads to burnout and stress, right? And so one thing that I think library leaders need to be especially aware of is as we bring in new things and try to bring in new technologies and experiences to bridge that digital divide, we have to let go of some things. We have to figure out what are the legacy services and responsibilities, tasks that we're not going to do to make room for these new things. And libraries try to be everything to everyone, and we can't do that, you know? So I think what also we can do as like library institutions is connect with each other to collaborate more on specializing in consortia and in collaborative groups so that, you know, different libraries can focus on different kinds of services, different kinds of outreach, different kinds of programs, and kind of distribute that expertise and that responsibility also, rather than just always shedding old things. We can also say, hey, you're going to be really great at this and I'm going to be really great at that, and we're going to refer people and share resources. And vendors have actually put a lot of kind of fake barriers between us, like, hey, these people can't use your resources because that's not in your contract. And I think we need to fight against that kind of thing to be more collaborative and be more powerful, right, in what we're able to offer. The last thing I would say about that is that so one thing that libraries have done really well in the last decade is focus on user experience and really kind of understand what are their users doing and being responsive to that. And I think we can double down on that for sure. And then creating a culture of innovation, experimentation, and play in the library. And that has to be, again, very intentional so that we're not like contributing to burnout and contributing to stress by saying, hey, if we think ChatGPT is the next big thing, you're going to spend time playing with it and trying it out and seeing what it can do and talking to people who are using it. And that's real work. And we're going to take something else off your plate and we're going to give you resources to do that. And we're going to reward and acknowledge that experimentation in play. And so we have to build that internally and encourage our users to do the same thing, because I think that's going to be absolutely necessary to deal with change in the future.
I like to think of it as practicing change, right? Of like, in order to like, change is always going to be hard and it's always going to be a little bit scary, but the more you practice it, even with small things within your life, then it gets a little bit easier each time. And we have a little motto we took from the folks over at in Denmark during Next Library, which is, yay, I made a mistake. Right. Right. And we actually celebrate it in our library system for exactly that reason of trying to encourage people like, it's okay. We all need to make mistakes, and they're not really mistakes as if we learn something from them, if there's something that we take away from them. So as far as things that I think people to prepare themselves for the future in libraries is really around the human component. And so listening and empathy. And that for me ties back into even the privacy work and the intellectual freedom work. When you care deeply about that individual's right, when you care deeply for them as a person and not just a number that you see, then you care about, you know, how you're collecting their data. You care about the consequences of what happens to their information. And you start to think more deeply about each of our individual users as real people and individuals. They're not, you know, just to kind of, you know, talk about your, you know, the vendors. giving these kind of segmented groups, and you can't view your contract and you can't view this one. And I was just saying earlier of like, oh, well, you can only be in this zip code to access this resource. So the same thing happens with segmenting our users, right? And so, oh, well, these users are the story time likers, you know, and we start to devalue them as individuals who have lived experiences that are different than ours or similar. And so I think in order to have that library of the future where we're able to not just build for community, but with community, we actually have to learn how to listen. And it is a skill. Like, we humans are generally not fantastic at it. It is something that we have to like change, practice listening, and not just waiting for the next thing to say. And we have to practice empathy. And that can be really hard if you have, you know, you're a frontline library worker and it's been stressful and you've been facing challenge after challenge with folks coming in. And how do you still have empathy for the last person you see that you did with the first person that you see as well? And so I think, you know, for anybody who's thinking about going into libraries, and especially libraries, I had a LIS professor once say that they asked their students, do you like working with the public? Do you like the public? Do you like people? And you know, it's libraries are more about, but we are those community centers. We are those places, especially public libraries, but you know, we are those heart of where people come to just be. We're like the last, and I hope this continues into 2035, one of the last places people can go where you don't have to spend money to be there. You can just be a human, and somebody, you know, is there to talk to you. So learning those skills, learning those interpersonal communication skills, it seems like, you know, not something that you would really think about like, oh, I need to learn my, you know, information science and all that. So those skills are important. But at the end of the day, the human skills, I think, are going to be the most important things to learn.
Thank you. I just wanted to just mention that I think that that's great points. And also, I think that traditionally people think of libraries as book collections. So that idea of focusing on the human aspect, the interpersonal, the connections that libraries can provide, I think is it's useful to think about.
Absolutely. Library work is actually people work. It really is. And that's for every position that we actually have in our libraries at every level. And so it also, I think, one of the things I would encourage anyone interested in working in libraries or currently working is to be intellectually curious, to have a sense of appreciative inquiry about the work that we do. We go to library school for a certain amount of time, but the learning doesn't stop there. We should be always trying to seek as much information about our community. In fact, on so many levels, that's part of our job, is how do we become our own community's expert about the composition of that community, what their needs are, how that changes. Continuing education should be a part of our middle name, to be honest. Also leading from every position. So many of us, and especially I'm saying this to all the young people in the room, because I think we think that there has to be a title that's associated with leadership. Leadership happens everywhere, and there's lots of opportunities. And so please, you know, check out all of the people that are associated in your world to see about ways that you can engage to have a stronger experience, whether it's project management or having a little bit of experience with a budget for the first time, or just learning how governance works in your institution. Those are all very important aspects. So that's what I mean about being maybe a community expert, both internally in your own organization, as well as externally in the community as a whole. And then to remember that every door is a right door. We want everyone who comes into our buildings or visits it virtually or just learns about it to have the best experience possible so they can return. It is a very important part of our being. In order for us to be relevant and resonant and around in 2035, right? We need to make sure that our community feels as welcome as possible and is part of the development of that service. Yeah, I think that's what I'd share.
Thank you all for sharing your perspectives. I think you touched on a lot of important key themes. I was happy to hear about the focus on library workers and staff and the importance of wellness and burnout. Those are very real issues in today's libraries. One thing I think I want to amplify on top of what you all talked about is also some of the themes related to kind of futures thinking and scenario planning, and in terms of planning for that desired future. And that's something that did also come through in the book quite a lot in terms of using those kinds of techniques. You guys touched on some of them in terms of the community needs analysis and thinking about that, but also in terms of some of the scenario planning and some of the building on the user-centered design focus that Christina was talking about, design thinking, looking at the data to make decisions, environmental scanning. All of those I think are really important to highlight as we're thinking about the future as well, and making sure that we're positioning ourselves well and prepared well for the future. I think you guys touched on a lot of the other things in terms of trust and resilience, adaptability, access, partnerships. So I think that's great. Okay, moving on to the next question then is, I'm going to start with you, Erin, this time. What makes you most excited about being in libraries right now?
I think the thing that makes me most excited right now is the equity work that I see happening all across libraries. I might be slightly biased on that since I'm the Equitable Libraries Division Director for my system. So it might make me slightly happy, but to see, to see this as more than a trend, but to see libraries stepping up and saying, we're going to be anti-racist organizations, that they're putting racial equity action plans into place, and that it's being intentional and not just shoulder tapping the same people all over again. So I think about, the work we're doing on the Intellectual Freedom Manual right now. Every single author in it for the previous editions was white. And myself and the co-editor did not think that was appropriate. And I've been very intentional about how do we get voices who haven't necessarily been heard and not heard in this manual, right? To step up and have their voices heard as well. And it has to be intentional, right? We have to put those processes in place because it's important for all of our users to be able to come in and have access to the things that they need to live the life that they want to live. And because as public libraries, we also have influence within our own governments. And I would hope that there's influence that, the academic libraries can have within their academic systems as well. I think it's a little bit harder for some of the school libraries to have that influence, especially in today's climate, but that we can make those changes and especially us larger systems can make changes that can support the smaller libraries that are out there in being able to update their policies and procedures as well. So that's what I'm excited about.
Thanks. I agree. I'm excited by all those things. I would say, one of the things that excites me about libraries is the same thing that has always excited me, which is it is literally our purpose as an institution to provide free, open access to information and knowledge creation tools and creative tools, and to share that and preserve it. And our point is to be welcoming and inclusive and create a space of belonging. And so we're completely empowered, right, to do that and to be that. And then we also put ourselves right in the middle of these conversations about things like privacy and equity and algorithmic transparency. And we fight on the side of public interest for those things. And I love that libraries encourage people to do that. And we've rejected neutrality, hopefully, mostly. And that we have librarians fighting against book bans and against restricting materials. And just as a profession, we want this freedom of access and this freedom of information. And so I'm still incredibly excited about that and motivated by it every day. And I will say that to me, I've always felt that the libraries can define themselves. I've never felt like I can't build something in a library that users want or the community needs, or it seems like our academic folks are looking for, no one's ever said, no, libraries don't do that to me, I will say. So here, one of the great things about San Jose State, folks, is that, you know, we want to build a VR lab, we want to build an entrepreneurial center, we want prototyping, we want a digital humanities center, which brings folks from the community practitioners like to our researchers and to our amazing resources and connects our students with our community to discover new things about intersectionality and then create amazing interactive online exhibits about it. Like, yes, okay, we're going to do that too. So it's kind of like, I feel like libraries can define themselves and the only limitation on them is how we want to limit ourselves, right? As long as we are in close relationship and partnership with the populations that we serve and need to serve and should serve, I think that we're on the right track. And I feel like we are. And I always just feel so empowered to work in the library, actually. And to me, that's like endlessly exciting.
One of the things that inspires me about the next generation of libraries and the future of libraries is that we don't use the word neutral anymore. We have a perspective. We actually should use it to advocate for the community that we serve. Sandy mentioned digital equity. You know, all of those wonderful things, Christina, that you mentioned about the creation and the articulation and the innovation and use and facilitation of technology is wonderful, but it's only wonderful if you have enough bandwidth. So coming from a community where, and you would think Santa Clara would have lots of bandwidth. We do, but not enough for everybody. And that is something that I think, this is not an indictment of my city. It is an indictment of this country in terms of thinking that, that digital access is not as important as water and electricity. We know it is, and it's integral to the success of everyone that we see around us. So isn't it worthwhile that that should also be free or low cost and accessible to all? But we are at a precipice. When I was Yolo County librarian, one of the things I did was create, with a number of really stellar people, a broadband plan for the entire county. Now, the reason we did that is not because any one of us was, you know, singularly responsible for that, but together we were able to bring 10 Gs in my small little county library when we only we had, you know, less than 1.5, right? So it made a difference because we were able to navigate, strategize, articulate, facilitate conversations and the relationships. So, you know, partnerships is really kind of a middle name, I think, for almost all of us now. We can't thrive and we can't do it alone. We have to do it together. So that's the exciting part, is that what I'm talking about now and these examples, those are going to become more mainstay. Those are going to become everyday kind of examples of the way that we can influence the state of this country and the success of our immediate community.
Well, thank you so much. You guys were very inspiring. And I think that I'm really glad you surfaced that, Patty, about the broadband access. I know we're here in the Silicon Valley, so it's always hard for some folks to imagine that, and not everyone has full access to all the basic technology that they need and just the basic access to the broadband. So it was good to surface that. And so those were the 3 questions I had prepared in advance. So I'd like to open it up to questions to the audience now. So I don't know if there's any questions online or any questions in the room.
This has been great. Thank you. I would just like to ask, as librarians, how you would speak to your patrons when they come in, if they do, and ask you to take certain books off the shelf because they're not to their liking.
So I listen first. my director likes to actually say that I have this magical ability to go from talking to people who are extremist in some of their views on the right, or perhaps, just have some views that are very contradictory to intellectual freedom. Let's put it that way, right? And by the end of the conversation, we were talking about how to download books onto your Kindle with Overdrive, right? And so I think most of the time, people want to be heard and they want to be respected in their beliefs. It doesn't mean I have to agree with them, but they want to be heard. And I'll give you a good example of that. Was we, at one of our libraries a couple of years ago, had the Proud Boys come and storm our library during drag queen story time. And then the following year, we had another story time, and we had a protest outside with about 150 people protesting outside the library. And I was the wrangler of people outside to keep the two sides away from each other and all that sort of stuff. And I had a group of people started heckling at me and stuff. And so I went over and I introduced myself and we started talking. And we started talking about the reasons why they were upset. And I heard them and I said, I actually think we have more in common than you would think. Like, I actually really care about parental rights too. Like, that really matters to me. And I care about these things, and finding the moments of where you intersect is actually really important. You might not change anybody's mind, but at the end of that conversation, they said, we had never talked to anybody with your viewpoints before. We had never had anybody come and just talk to us about this. And they didn't heckle anymore, right? Like, we shook hands and had a pleasant conversation. And so I think that's my viewpoint, is listening, hearing, and actually respecting them as an individual. They have reasons why they've come to the conclusions that they've come to. And we usually can talk to them through it.
That's wonderful. Sounds like a real good librarian answer.
And it's interesting in this area, most of the time, the takedown requests I get are almost the opposite of what you hear in the news in the rest of the country, which is I get takedown requests of, I think this book is racist. That's kind of, it's the two sides meeting back in the middle again, and having to explain to people intellectual freedom is intellectual freedom.
So did you invite the Proud Boys to have a story time the next week? With the kids? We did have Kirk Cameron ask us to host a story time. And we gave him the same answer that we give anybody in the community, which is fill out the form and, we can go from there. Kirk Cameron, that's his name, right?
So we have a couple questions online. We have a question from Kathleen that says, what advice would you give to a library science student starting their career in 2024?
We actually have several current students on my staff. And so what the advice, and I actually have a cohort that I meet with them pretty regularly. Once a month, we try to meet. So I think it's be patient with yourself, pace yourself. There's so much of information. You're so excited about getting involved. Do get involved. Get involved in the student associations, explore lots of different kinds of activities. Because I'm not sure if the student is with the iSchool program or thinking about the iSchool program, because most of our programs are online now. One of the key things is the relationship building that you have with your colleagues. And that might mean, your colleagues in the same class, or it might mean the colleagues that you work with at work. One of the things that I also share with our team is, if you're studying something in school, tell your supervisor about it so we can help enrich your experience. Because if you're practicing and you're working in the library, we might as well dig into that a little bit with you so that you can have a strong background. So be an advocate for yourself. I think a lot of times those faculty ratings actually are very helpful in deciding who you want to work with and who you want to study with. And then deepen the work. I would actually say also take as many classes as you can while you've got the opportunity. even if it's in an area that you're not interested or you don't think you're interested in. I just convinced a whole bunch of people to take cataloging the other day. I'm being serious because I think quite a few of them thought they would never think about that, but they were all very interested in the technical services side of things. And I said, how could we help you bring those talents to the shop at home if you haven't taken cataloging because you don't have the basics yet? And I don't have enough time and bandwidth on my team to be able to really take that class with you or for you. So be generous with yourself and know that you actually come equipped with a lot of different good skills and experience that you can share with your colleagues. So don't be shy. Don't be shy.
I'm so glad that you said that about taking classes that you might not think to take. I think that's gets back to what Mike said in his introduction. I think something about being curious about the future. I think that, our field is so diverse and so interesting, and there's so many different facets. Until you start taking or experimenting in some of the classes, you may not even know that there's something there that would interest you until you just take a chance and try a class. And if that's the best time to experiment is when you're a student. And then the other thing I wanted to add, well, a couple of things. One is to put yourself out there, to take advantage of the opportunities while you are a student. I think it's important to get involved in your profession, in your school leadership, get internship experience. All those things make a difference and will make you differentiated when you go out to look for a job. And finally, my last point that I always like to make is that it is, I think it's important to remember that our field, as you've heard, is changing constantly and it's evolving. That's even in the name of this series that we're in today. And so the fact that it's evolving means that your degree that you get in the AI school is just a starting point to your learning journey, and that you have to continually invest in your learning on an ongoing basis. It's not a one and done. It's this is my first step, and now I have to keep learning and growing to make sure I'm meeting the needs and keeping up pace with all the changes that are happening, which to me is one of the most exciting things about our field anyway. I think, unfortunately, do we have one more? Okay, then we'll take one more question.
We'll do one more. So we have a question from Peggy. How will public library services change as a result of AI?
I think you mentioned a little bit about chatbots for like general customer service. I do think across the board, there'll probably be some changes in cataloging, metadata, collections analysis, all of those sorts of things. I can tell you I've used generative AI on an almost daily basis at this point in time, a lot as kind of a writing editor and thought assistant. And so, I've seen people using it for program planning, here, I've got this, idea for something, let's talk it through, it's a conversational tool. And so kind of looking at it through that light. So I see a lot of change in that. I think as people become more familiar with it and becomes more integrated in their lives, also asking us, just like all sorts of other technology, asking us, how do I interact with this? How do I interact with it safely? We talk about, within our libraries of like, yeah, you can use it, but not to put in anybody's personally identifiable information, right? Like I don't even put in my own personally identifiable information, but looking at how we have to get comfortable with it first and then start exploring. And I think when we start talking about it being used behind the scenes and things like chatbots and things like cataloging or collection analysis, things that are offered to us by vendors, that's when we really need to start, again, being very conscientious about how that data is being used, who has access to it, who may have access to it inadvertently as well. There's lots of, Google double-click ads on Overdrive, and then you'll start getting ads because they can source all your data from there. So we have to be really careful about how people's information is getting out there. And so it's something that we'll have to be cognizant about as it becomes more and more used.
Maybe the only thing that I might add is that we also have to be not just at the public library side, but as consumers, to be aware that AI is only as good as the information that's included. And so what we know proportionately is that as of this moment, there isn't a whole lot of what I might consider strong factual information, especially about BIPOC communities. And so as a result of that, there's some skewed versions of information that are out there. So it's being an advocate in working with, so we're smack dab in the middle of Silicon Valley, right? NVIDIA is just down the street from my library. And the source of a lot of this information needs to be something that, as advocates, libraries need to be part of the table, not at the table, helping to make some of this work happen. I know that Mike and Anthony and I were at a state library convening where we were talking about AI in a very productive way to see if we could envision a stronger way of interacting with the producers of the information so that we so that we could influence, so that it could be much more inclusive than exclusive, so that the information that we could achieve would be much more productive for the common good, essentially. Yeah.
I don't know, Mike might be doing this anyway, but can we just thank this amazing panel? They were incredible. Thank you so much. Really appreciated you guys coming out and speaking with us today. I really enjoyed your comments. So I'm going to turn this over to Mike.
Thank you, Sandy. And thank you to Sandy. Yes, but we'll do it in a second. Before we wrap up, I just want to quickly reflect that there's no talk in this day and age, 2024, June, that we would not be able to talk about AI or ChatGPT. However, I very much appreciate that we didn't get to that until the end of our conversation. So I want to thank all of you because you really centered community and people at the core of your conversations and at your comments, whether it's the individual or the larger community, and how we have to, as libraries, do that. And I think that's something we need to keep in mind as we think about our future, is that technologies come and go. You know, I often joke that the future is about robots and lasers, which some people find intriguing, some people find scary, but that's a whole nother conversation. But the point is, technologies come and go. But what doesn't change is the need of the community to be together, to have a hub, to have access to good technology, to working AC, to a safe place to explore intellectual ideas. And I don't think whatever the age is that we're talking about, whether it's 2035 or somewhere else in the future, that will ever change. So thank you all for kind of reaffirming what I think is also part of our future. With that, I want to thank our panel. So I'm going to go from thank you to Christina, who I have the pleasure of working with every day. Thank you to Aaron. Thank you to Patty. And thank you to Sandy for also moderating. And I work with Sandy also every day. So thank you to our panelists and the moderator, please. Let's give them a round of applause if you like. I'm getting there right now. Perfect. See, we are about community. We are about people. So thank you. It takes a village to make a talk like this happen. So there's a lot of people to thank. Virginia Wright, Christina Monet, Sandy Hirsh, Mariah Ramsar, who's over there and read out the comments, Leslie Seacrest, who's in the back taking pictures, Melissa Chu, who I don't think is in the room, but hopefully online, Josephine right there, Ricky right there helping us with the live broadcast, Joe and Van is also somewhere, I think, taking pictures, and Joe helped with a lot of the marketing materials. So thank you to all of you for helping us put on this great Evolving Library 2024 event. And with that, I also want to thank our audience, whether you came to us in the library here at the beautiful King Library in San Jose, or if you're online watching this whenever you may be live right now, maybe you'll revisit this. But thank you all for participating. I think at this point, we're going to close out the live stream. So take care, y'all online. We'll see you some other time, maybe at ALA next week. If so, there is a reception for the iSchool on, Anthony, when is it? Saturday? Saturday afternoon. So 3 to 5. There you go. Join us. There's still time to RSVP. For everybody else, we'll see you around. Hopefully you found this talk inspiring. Stay curious about the future, and you'll be there for it, as we will be. So let's go and see where we're going to end up. Have fun. Bye.